Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 23. It's been a while for me since I've read this, so let me see if I can remember it. We've got Lee over in West Australia.
Hello.
And Tim over in Victoria.
Hello.
And today we're going to be discussing three topics, which is unusual for a long time. Coming back to me having taken over after a long time. The three topics are the Sam Dastyari being sold to China.
Shanghai Sam. Should we refer to him Shanghai Sam for the rest of the rest of the show?
I'm happy for you to do so. Yeah. I will not.
He's the new Manchurian candidate.
Yeah, Manchurian candidate. That's the other good one.
There's obviously the claims that politicians are a bunch of bludgers, and that had to do with Morrison talking about taking a foot to New Start. And basically, a lot of people not being very happy with that. And finally, the Gillian Skinner, is it? The gold medal winning shooter from Australia at Rio.
I think you just said Catherine Skinner. You just said the New South Wales Health Minister's name.
Did I? Oh, my bad. I meant Catherine Skinner, not the Health Minister of South Wales, who has done nothing in this to do with guns. So, we're talking about, obviously, a shooter who featured in an advertisement with Beretta, and apparently a foundation associated with the victims of Port Arthur finds that promotes gun usage, which I think we all have lots of feels on. So let's start with the obvious one, Shanghai Sam.
Yes.
But just as a funny story, he was actually tipped to come to the Australian Libertarian Federation Freedman Conference.
Because he'd been very friendly.
Society Conference.
He'd been very friendly with David Linehelm, helping get his nanny state inquiry up.
Yep, and all the stuff as well. Which he
was And he's also pretty solid on financial reform around credit cards. Namely, that he wants to get the RBA out of dealing with credit cards because they're actually awful at it.
Yeah. So we should probably spell out the issue exactly what it is with Shanghai Sam before we...
To be perfectly honest, I don't think it's an issue. But there are lots of people that do. So actually, a Chinese businessman apparently paid for a dinner or something of his.
The story was that he'd overspent his travel allowance. I mean, that's pretty bad in itself, overspending your travel allowance. So I said to this Chinese businessman who's connected to the Chinese government, can you pay the difference, which is about $1,500? And they did. And then it was revealed later in the week that he had spewed basically Chinese talking points on the South China Sea dispute, which was in direct contradiction to both Coalition and Labor Party policy. And so everyone said he'd basically been bought.
Yep.
So
very cheaply.
$1,500 is pretty good.
So here's the thing. I actually don't think he's been bought. I've heard him. This is just because I've seen him before. He's espoused these views before. So I place it in the same category as when David Linehelm took cigarette money. He was for it, and then he was fucking for it. Yeah. So, from my perspective, I don't think he's particularly done anything wrong. And my position on foreign donations in general is I don't actually care if external parties want to subsidize Australian democracy. In fact, I'd love for them to do that. My only condition is that it should be 100% transparent, and we should be talking exactly, to how much of the influence has been bought from the politicians.
Well, it takes, 6 months for donations to be disclosed. I mean, it still hasn't been disclosed Turnbull's donation to his own campaign, but everyone knows he donated, $1 million, perhaps $2 million. It hasn't been disclosed yet, but everybody knows it already.
Yeah. So this is actually, I think I mentioned this once, what would be fantastic is if they reform the way that finance worked, campaign financing worked, and instead of having this thing where they've got to report it, what should actually happen is anytime you publish one of those ads that say, uh, basically spoken by blah 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 for whichever group, all those ads have to be funded out of a bank account that anyone can open from the RBA, and the RBA just publishes that information in real time. So if you want to find out who paid for, who's bought and paid for political parties, you just go and take a look at the RBA's website for this thing. I think that would be really, really fantastic, just because it increases the transparency element.
I mean, there is an argument though. Like, so I'm generally speaking, I'm with you on all of what you said. Don't care if the Koch brothers want to fund the LDP. I'm all for it. They'd probably get more bang for their buck than funding the Republican Party. I'm happy with China to bankroll Shanghai Sam and Bob Carr and all the others. And yeah, transparency I think is generally. I mean, it's better to have. If you can have, because there's two approaches with campaign finance. You can either restrict how much money is coming into the system, or you can make it really transparent. And I'm for the transparency. Like, if we're going to have some sort of regulation of campaign finance, it should be just anybody can spend any amount of money, anybody can give any amount of money, it can come from anywhere, but you got to tell people where it's coming and going. However, I think there is an argument against that from a libertarian perspective that says really that, well, firstly, it's none of the government's business. Secondly, all that matters is the end communication. So, I mean, if there's bribery, so paying to get votes, that's a different thing from funding a election campaign where they give a message saying X, Y, and Z. I mean, the talking points that he had on the South China Sea, like, there's lots of people who believe that, like,
typically,
who aren't being funded by the Chinese government. And
so,
all that matters is that he's saying those things. Like, it's not, there's no, like, it's irrelevant if he's getting money from China or not.
So what I was actually
it appears to me this is why I'm critical of Dastiari, is that it looks more to me that he's basically been bought, and it's like, well, how can you really be a conviction politician if you're suddenly just spewing Chinese talking points in contradiction to what your party is?
Well,
I mean, it just looks really.
Are there defense experts? Isn't there that Hugh White guy who's always talking about letting China basically do whatever the hell they want in the South China Sea? I mean, he's like one of the he's got op-eds constantly in the Australian and in other newspapers. Like, he's constantly on the TV. Like, there's respectable people who have that view. So
and I was just gonna say, I don't think anyone has ever referred to Sam Dastyari as a conviction politician.
Yeah, he's
literally the first time I've ever heard anyone call him a conviction politician.
Wasn't he like the head of the New South Wales Labor Party? Like, he's during the period of time where Gillard and Rudd were like tearing each other down. Like, that guy is like primo hack number one.
Yeah.
The reason why I jump on him over this is the fact that he portrays himself as this moral crusader against, obviously, the big banks. He wants the Royal Commission into the banks, and he also wants those evil multinationals like Apple to pay more tax. So sort of he says he's all high and mighty, yet look at what he's doing in reality.
Sure, I mean that's true, but I mean that's basically the.
Like, we all know that Dastyari's, not Mr. Moral High Ground, but ordinary people need to know that no, this guy's not pure at all.
Sure, but I don't think I don't think people think of that about anybody in politics, really. So
that's not no.
But my third point, I was going to make a third point as well.
Yeah, so I was going to say, definitely personality cults in politics.
My third point is basically going to be that. So, firstly, it's not the government's job to sort of know. Secondly, what matters is the ideas, to the extent that ideas actually matter in an election. Thirdly, there's a really good case to be made that that wealthy people can essentially bankroll they can bankroll candidates who wouldn't get mainstream sort of dollars. So if you look at the US election, essentially you have a situation where if you want to run, you essentially need to have this massive apparatus. There's no way the Koch brothers could essentially take a Ron Paul and make him the presidential candidate, because essentially the system is stacked against you. I mean, there's an argument to say that there should be the ability for small groups of people with lots of money to bankroll campaigns for people whose ideas they really believe in. You know, if you think about, like, maybe there is an Australian Ron Paul out there, and Gina Reinhardt, and Sam Kennard, and Ron Manners, and whoever else, like the 405 actually rich libertarians in Australia would love to bankroll them, but if they were to do that, they're essentially, like, the whole system, like the whole transparency system, actually discourages them, because then all of a sudden it's about money, and like it's essentially the transparency makes it harder for people to do that.
No, I mean, it doesn't because Clive Palmer ran on his own money, and it didn't. I mean, Clive Palmer's entire thing was that he's a freaking buffoon, but he still ran on his own time, and that was really well known. The typical argument against transparency is that if BDS campaigns are launched on political donors, and that is actually a distinct likelihood on political donations, but I think it's actually self-regulating, because the moment you signal, like, okay, it's all about market signaling, right?
If you should say, for the benefit of those who don't know what a boycott, divestment, sanctions is what BDS stands for.
Yeah, so yes, BDS typically run by unions. So the thing is, if a union runs a BDS campaign on someone who donated to a particular political party, that strengthens the allegiance between that party and that person. So theoretically, the people from that party should be countering that BDS by purchasing it. So, in fact, I'm not saying that there won't be a little bit of pain, but I suspect that the pain that they're talking about is largely overestimated. I think that there is lots of evidence saying BDS campaigns are not as effective as people say they are. There's hit and miss ones where they are quite effective, but usually they're not. Usually, and the state of Israel can speak to this, they are quite ineffective. But that brings me to my next point about the laziness of politicians. Or rather, Ray Hadley saying that politicians are lazy.
Who would have thought that talking about lazy politicians would get a run on a libertarian podcast? It's hard to believe.
Well, their laziness was on display last Thursday night when some of the coalition MPs decided to knock off early, and Labor pulled one of the greatest parliamentary tricks I think I've seen.
Yep, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, is that if Labor gave the impression that their MPs were leaving, and so three coalition ministers, was it Keenan, Dutton and Porter, they all left early, and Labor were watching them all the time, making sure they were as far away as possible before trying to bring a vote on the Banks Royal Commission. Because everyone the government just assumed that Parliament was just going to be adjourned on the voices, but Labor pulled this motion at the last minute, and so they had to ring up the ministers and the MPs who were at the airport on the planes. They had to rush back to make sure that they could get the numbers on the floor of the Parliament. It was quite a circus.
Yeah, it was, and quite frankly, there's no one to blame for that but Christopher Pyne.
Yeah.
So,
and the whips as well.
Christopher Pyne is the whip. Chris Pyne is the whip.
No, he's the leader of the House. I get confused. Leader of the House sets the agenda, while the whips, they're just backbenchers who, make sure where all the MPs are at all times.
Okay, fair enough. So the whips, and basically, like, from my perspective, that to me that says that politicians aren't lazy.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the reality. Like, Australians keep saying that politicians are lazy because they only meet 26 weeks of the year. That they're only in Canberra and actually debating policy 26 weeks of the year. That they basically have so much more time to spend with their constituents, which most people regard as being vacation time or whatever it is. But the reality is, I would much rather them not be here in Canberra. And largely it's because the more time they spend away from the legislature, the less damage they're actually doing to individual liberties.
Well, that's because they're more likely to pass legislation than actually repeal it, which is, I mean, that was what everyone was like. People who defended the Gillard government were saying, it was such a good government because it passed so many more laws. So I understand that that reasoning that they're more likely to do damage when they're there. But if we want to actually, if we want governments to do the right thing, or stuff that we want, they actually have to be in Canberra for it to repeal legislation and pass spending guts.
That's fine. They can just pass all of the repeals in one day. But what I was going to say is, there's also...
You don't know much about parliamentary process, do you?
They were able to pass the Thingo bill, what do you call it, the Banking Royal Commission bill in a period of 2 hours. They can pass it as fast as they want. It's slow when they want it to be slow. It's fast when they want it to be fast.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, they took forever to pass the Senate voting reforms.
But you need the numbers to be able to do that. To be fair,
you need the numbers.
And the reason the Banking Royal Commission thing nearly got passed is because it already passed in the Senate, and so it just needed to pass in the House, and then it basically would have been unrepealable because apparently, like they did back in the '60s and the Menzies, like Labor did the same thing, but then the next week the House just sat and just repealed it all because they had the numbers. So it's
yeah, that's
and the Senate's where it's usually get bogged down as well because that's where they have all the inquiries.
Correct. Like I said, it's literally up to the politicians how fast or how slow they want to make. But the more insidious part is actually what we like to call ministerial interventions, and these are we all regard these as being a fantastic thing, right? Because we can go to our local MP if a government service is not working how we want it to work, and they'll get their electoral officer to step in and get the shit done through the regular through the channels that they've got into the public service. That actually increases the cost of managing the public service, and it actually there are actual real costs associated with all of these ministerial interventions, and that's another side that people don't actually ever see. So politicians, on top of taking away liberties, typically also make the public service more expensive. And it's not just their pay packets, it's not just their travel allowances, it's the way they interact with government itself. They make the government more inefficient. And it's a side that's rarely seen. And quite frankly, I would like them to do as little as possible. So when people say politicians are being lazy, I sit there and say, actually, it's the opposite. They're actually being too interventionist in the operations of government.
But there's also the frivolous stuff that they do, which is go to all these ribbon cutting events, mingle with people. I mean, do they really need to do all this networking all the time?
No,
go
they do.
To all these schools and
they do. It's like pork.
They need to do that. They do need to do that for their profession. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be publicly funded because they can go upwards of. I've seen as high as $200,000 on a ceremony just for a minister to attend. This is what I'm talking about. It's not the case that they're lazy. It's the fact that they're too involved in the government office. So I would like a system where something is announced in Parliament, it gets done. There's no ribbon cutting ceremony or anything. It just gets done.
That's just pie in the sky though, because it's
pork.
So I've even though as a libertarian I'm against pork. In reality, as a feature of realpolitik, you need pork. It's the bread and butter of how a local member of parliament proves his worth to his electorate. Is these are the things I've brought to my electorate. There's no other way to do it. There's
I don't see why they can't spend their party funds, which are coming from public money anyway, to do that.
Sure, but party funds. I don't think the parties have that much money.
Because they all get together and just decide on the rules themselves, the major parties.
Sure, but
what do you mean they don't get much money?
Well, as in in the scheme of things,
$160 million was assigned in public funding for the last election.
It's a drop in the bucket compared to the money the federal government has. They got a $400 billion budget.
I'm not saying that it's a large number.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's a large number. I am saying they have been given that much money.
Sure. But
for their campaigning,
election campaigns are really expensive.
That's fine.
And all of their money.
I'd like to see less of it. I'd like to see less of it.
Sure, but
and the best way to do that is by saying if they want to go out and do these ribbon cutting ceremonies, They pay for it out of their party funds.
Yeah, and that's great. That's a great idea. It's never going to happen.
I know it's
Never in a
gonna
million
happen,
years.
but
Like the minimum wage will be abolished before they get rid of that sort of stuff.
yeah, but we can start the conversation, and as long as a politician takes it,
We're allowed to propose things, Lee. There's a lot of what us libertarians discuss and propose, which you can say is never going to happen.
Yeah, but there's a list. There's like a list of things that are never going to happen in like the order which they will never happen. With things that they're never going to happen that are more likely to not never happen than other things. And like getting rid of that sort of stuff, like basically making political parties pay for kind of essentially the regular sort of stuff that MPs do. That's less likely to happen than say minimum wage being abolished or concealed carry or like $500 million.
You really
other
think
things.
So?
Yeah, because
no.
Like political parties are not that loaded. Like, okay, they have a lot of money, but like it's actually really expensive to run a political campaign. Like, it's not.
I have no doubt. But what I'm expecting is if we start the conversation about this, right? I'm hoping that the compromise position is something like, hey, you know what? You now can only go flying between your electorate or the nearest airport from your electorate to Canberra, right? And that'll be the compromise. Right, which means they're little travel junkets, right, which are costing us millions of dollars a year. All of a sudden, that's a huge hit on the bottom.
It's
bottom
really actually not that much. In the end, I wouldn't imagine it actually add up to that much.
It's actually it's a huge part of the PM&C budget. Right?
How much is the PMC budget?
And this is
exactly. That's it. Like you're talking about something that's going to massively, like politicians are never going to go for in a million years, and doesn't actually cost that much. Like, in the scheme of federal government budgets, like that sort of stuff is peanuts, generally.
Yeah, but then again, neither is New Start. New Start isn't that big a component either.
Yeah, and it's the perception as well. It's the perception that they're always telling us, budget emergency, we've got to, cut back on things, and everyone sees them, having all these various expenses, going on trips all the time, and it's saying, well, you're lecturing us, you're living the 5-star life, why should we listen to you?
Sure, I don't disagree. Like, but it's just. Like, there's a lot of other things.
You can't just say that it wouldn't make much difference to the budget. It's about, and I hate using this term as a libertarian, that the politicians have got to set an example and also send a message to the others if they're going to lecture the Australian people on various.
Just get to the New Start comparison. Like we should move on. We should move on in a sec. But I'll make this comment. The thing about the New Start is it's not so much what it costs the budget, which is a problem. But it's more of the incentive effects it has on poor people. Like, for me, that's the bigger issue to do with things like New Start and to welfare in general. Like, a lot of these programs have unintended consequences that are really damaging to people. Members of Parliament like getting travel allowance to go and cut ribbons. Not exactly like the worst thing in the world.
No, but it does encourage. It does actually have a disincentivizing effect. Sorry, it basically incentivizes certain types of behavior that we would probably like to stop seeing happen. Like, for example, pork barreling, right? So if we start removing their ability to do that, I think by your very comparison, we have a very strong method of stopping their pork barreling.
But if libertarians were to get into politics, they would rely on pork as well.
Yeah, they would. And
there's no other way of proving your worth to your local electorate apart from pork. Not in a way that matters.
Look.
Well, because that's just the conventional wisdom.
No, it's not the conventional wisdom. It's because of all the stuff that, like, when we talk about the knowledge, like, the cost of understanding politics and how expensive it is to understand politics. The easiest way to convey worth in a world where people don't give a crap about ideas, which is the world we live in, where it's really expensive to understand politics, the cheapest way to convey your worth is to get stuff built in your electorate.
There have been leaders elected who've done nothing. Like, Coolidge is a perfect example. He got elected on nothing.
He did less than others, but it's not exact. Well, firstly, the federal government did a lot less back in those days. Secondly, the federal government still probably did a lot of stuff. It's just that he didn't expand it much beyond what it was doing.
Which is
also,
still...
I mean, really, Coolidge was also well before the modern welfare state, so he's not quite the same comparison. Obviously, some people like senators who have a particular thing that they offer to the constituency that like them, like a David Lionel. Like, David Lionel can promise no pork because he's a libertarian senator, and senators don't have electorates really. They got states as their electorate, but it's not like you're like. I mean, I think about the electorate of around Basildon. It's 2 towns. It's 2 small towns with like 40,000 people or 35,000 people. Like, you have to do stuff in your electorate. Otherwise, the next guy who comes against you says, well, I promised to do these things. How can you counter that? Like, unless people are already on board for the Libertarian Revolution where they're like, let's get rid of pork, which is not, it's possible. It's not going to happen soon. You have to deliver pork. Like, until you get to the day where people actually hate politicians and want to get rid of them out of their lives, pork is how you grease the wheels in politics. But we should move on because we've got a few minutes left.
I was going to say. Yeah, I was going to say. So the last topic, and we only really have 5 minutes to talk about it, is Catherine Skinner, gold-winning medalist from Rio, featured on an ad with Beretta. Yes, Beretta Australia. And what's the name of the foundation, Tim?
The Alana and Madeline Foundation, which we should say what its general mission is to stop violence against children, but the anti-gun message is a big part of its advocacy.
Yeah, we should say that Catherine Skinner was like a trap shooter at Rio, and Beretta is a company that makes guns because there's people out there who don't know stuff about guns, so.
I don't believe they listen to this podcast, but
they might.
They might. But anyway, so the point is, it's a very simple ad about trying to get people into sporting shooting, which I think, as a gun company in Australia, that's probably their bread and butter. That's probably the only thing they do. So I don't understand the problem at all.
Well, that's because you're not thinking about it very hard. Then it's very easy to understand the problem. The problem is, lots of Australians don't like guns at all.
That's fine.
In the same way that certain segments of the population hate the muzzies and really want to make sure the muzzies don't come and bring their halal and their burkinis, you've got another segment of the population who hate guns, always will hate guns, and even even people who win gold medals at the Olympics are not good enough to promote the fact that...
Well, it's because people who don't like guns, they can't understand, it doesn't occur to them at all why anyone would like guns and want to shoot them for fun. It's that sort of thing, well, I don't understand it, so it's, bad.
Yeah, I don't think it's they don't understand. I think it's they think that people who like those things are evil.
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's
basically a nanny state, nanny state position that they're putting.
So
forward.
if you are one of those people, pretend that we have one less gold medal then.
Yeah.
It's trap shooting. It's trap shooting. I'm sitting there going like, oh my god, there's people shooting at clay going. Oh.
But you should know how the nanny state works by now. It's that if something looks bad, is associated with harm. I mean, you could say the same like. There's probably been cases, of advertising, drinking, saying that, that's promoting, domestic violence. There's been cases like that.
No. There were ads way back in the 1980s, which you could say promoted domestic violence. Sorry, not
drinking ads.
Drinking ads, not domestic violence. Sorry, so they promote sexual assault. Yes. I mean, there were ads in the 1980s which did that, and I understand people saying those ads were bad, but I never would have agreed to saying, we should regulate the way.
We should sort of make might as well make the point this is only one foundation that's come out, like an anti-gun foundation that's come out against it.
But it's got
not necessarily we've got a massive popular swell against it. I mean, I think the nature of the gun debate in Australia. I mean, I guess as libertarians, we're heavily influenced by US views on guns, especially US libertarian views on guns, which are obviously incredibly pro-gun or pro property ownership. And the US has a very different culture when it comes to firearms. We don't have anything like that in Australia. We never have. We probably never will.
You can speak for yourself. I'm much more from the New Zealand school of gun ownership.
Okay, sure. I think though, I think most Australians are cool with sports shooting. So I think most people would see the billboard and go, "Oh, cool. All right, whatever. It's not their thing. They may not like it, but they don't have a problem with it." But elites in Australia have a real problem with guns. In the same way elites in the US, like left-wing elites.
And the
if
media
you go to
is
Massachusetts and say let's have guns, they'll be like, "What planet are you from?" So like, I think it's really like the response to this particular billboard is not a broad, like.
but the media in Australia, it does really hate guns. I mean,
Yeah,
whenever
sure.
there's guns is brought up, they always are really oh, this will if we allow any sort of gun, it'll be like America with mass shootings, and they always bring out the victims, and you know how it works. It's not just an elites thing. It's like every major media organization in Australia as well, and that in turn influences the public to a degree and the politicians as well.
Yeah, well,
So you can't say that it's just one foundation.
No,
I mean,
I mean, I don't know. Well, I don't know what the polling on this particular issue is like. I suspect it is just elites. Like, I think my experience of most of the people I know don't like guns. Most of the people I know wouldn't support any form of self-defense rights to own a firearm. And they're not particularly political. They're just sort of regular Australians. I think though, if you said, "Can I shoot a rifle at a range?" they'd be like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So like, I think most people think sports shooting is okay. And this is what this billboard is for. It's a sports shooting ad. It's got an Olympic gold medalist who did sports shooting. And so, yeah, I actually think in this particular case, it is a thing against elites. If David Lionel came out and said, we should have concealed carry, you should be able to carry firearms on you at all times, or open carry for that matter, like, I think that would be a broader group of people would be against that, because I think broadly Australians have a very different view about guns when it comes to self-defense and ownership for that purpose.
Okay, so that's actually I have to stop us there because we've gone way over time now.
Sure.
But,
tell me what to do then.
Tell you what to do. Can't tell. Yes. I was going to say sure. Detained. Anyway, that's been a great episode. We'll catch you next week. I have no idea what the topics will be because the last time we tried to explain what topics we might talk about next week, we did not end up doing it at all.
And we actually forgot what they were going to be. So
something could happen. We don't know.
I think we can talk about unions and like employment rights and stuff. I don't know.
Anyway. Unions. Yeah. All right.
Good.
See everyone next week. Bye.
See yous.
Bye.